Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Hello, Patrick Donoghue here, news editor with the Irish Farmers Journal. This week, our dairy editor Jack Kennedy was in Brussels when the EU Council of Agriculture Ministers met to address the crisis in farmgate prices. He met the Irish Minister for Agriculture, Simon Coveney, and asked him for his views on the measures decided on Monday.
There's some good things coming out of today. The Commission has confirmed now that they're going to double the volume ceiling going into intervention for skim milk powder and also for butter, which is good. That's one of the things we were asking for. They're also talking about increasing funding for promotion of European dairy product into third markets. They're also talking about using an export credit tool, which is welcome. And they're also talking about introducing a new aid to private storage mechanism for pig meat, which is also welcome. The big concern here, of course, from an Irish perspective, was that they would do too much in relation to reintroducing supply control tools. That's something that we would have vigorously opposed. What's happened, I think, is acceptable to us. They're allowing countries on a voluntary basis to pay farmers to produce less milk, in simple terms. But countries have to use their own domestic budgets to do that rather than EU funds, which I think is welcome. The one thing I'm not happy with, yet anyway, is I'd like us to do a lot more in relation to fertiliser prices. The European Union charges import levies on fertiliser being imported into the European Union. What I'd like to see is a temporary suspension of those import levies, which could have quite a significant and positive impact on reducing fertiliser prices for farmers in the European Union. And of course that would benefit not only Irish dairy farmers but also Irish grain and beef farmers as well.
Any concern, Minister, that the changes to the intervention might actually delay the response of the market to better milk prices?
No, I don't think so. I mean, what we're trying to do is actually take product out of the market so that price recovers more quickly. That's the whole point of intervention. It allows you to actually sell product effectively into storage, and that product will then be released when the market has recovered in terms of an increase in demand or adjustments in supply. Intervention is a very important tool. We're using it extensively, and we've also looked for more flexibility in relation to aid to private storage for cheese, and again the Commission has said that they would show some flexibility there, which is helpful. So most of the things we've asked for we've got. The one addition that I would like to see is making a decision to temporarily suspend fertiliser levies, which would reduce the price of fertiliser. But to be fair, that's not something that is in the gift of the Agricultural Commissioner. That's something that the Taxation and Trade Commissioners have to agree on. And Commissioner Hogan is in favour of that, but I think there's work to do yet.
Do you see Ireland partaking in the voluntary scheme for the market measure?
No, I don't. The one thing Irish farmers are not asking for at the moment is to actually pay them to reduce milk output. Irish farmers have been planning now for 4 years for managed and controlled and sustainable expansion. I want to see Irish farmers ready to take advantage of an improving milk price that we will see in time. Everybody's impatient to get to that point, but certainly I think Irish farmers will be very well placed to take advantage of improving milk prices when that happens, in however many months' time it happens.
The general mood from other ministers in support of the market measures, was there much support from other ministers for the French proposal?
Yeah, no, many of the countries that would have been quite sceptical about doing away with dairy quotas would obviously now support the reintroduction of some supply controls. My view is that if we were to do that extensively, we'd be giving a gift to our competitors in other parts of the world who are supplying into markets outside of the European Union, markets that we're also supplying into. So, it's not acceptable for me that Europe would be the one dramatically pulling back on supply, paying public money to do that, when other parts of the world are simply readjusting to a temporary reduction in price. That's not to say that we don't need to help farmers through this period. We do. Prices have fallen dramatically last year. That was somewhat disguised by the bonuses that were given for milk last year because the quality was very, very good, particularly on good grass in the autumn. And that's not going to be there now for spring milk that's coming out in the back of silage. This is a big problem for dairy farmers, and we are looking to support them in the best way that we can. but I don't think we should go back to supply controls. I think that would be very negative.
There was one other question in terms of maybe deferral of the super levy payment. Is there any movement around that?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that we'll deal with the Commission on a bilateral basis. I think that countries that have a super levy aren't necessarily in a good position to make a strong case, because countries that actually don't have super levy, that are looking now to actually reduce output, wouldn't respond very well, I think, to our public calls for that. So we'll deal on a bilateral basis with the Commissioner on that issue.
Thank you.
Meanwhile, Belgian farmers were protesting outside the building. This is common sight in the European capital, and you might think local residents would get tired of having their streets blocked by tractors. But this Brussels woman told my colleague Amy Fitzgibbon that she supported the farmers.
I think they are not paid enough for the work, and they are losing money by producing milk and meats. Exactly. Yeah. So this is not normal, and this is for the profit of agro-industry, and I think this is not normal.
It's not normal, and it's such an important industry. They should be treated better. They should be given a fairer price.
Of course,
yeah.
Of course. We are drinking milk and eating meat thanks to them.
So you don't mind that they have nearly 40 tractors blocking up the street here today?
Not at all. I'm taking the metro and the train, so.
Okay, so you're not affected by it.
No.
This is the second time they've had tractors on the street. They had
this
tractors.
Is not the second time.
Oh, sorry. Since last September, since the last big meeting. But yeah.
Very often they are coming here because the situation is not improving. So this is normal that they continue to protest.
And what do you think the government can do, or do you have any idea what they can do to help them, or what the EU can do?
I think the government in Belgium is linked with the EU laws, and they cannot do anything without EU decisions. I mean, they say that. So the Belgian government says that this is the EU law.
Yes.
But the EU says this is the government to decide, and so there is no.
So there is no decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for talking to me today. Bye bye.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Some of the measures agreed on Monday aim to support exports. One example of recent efforts to access new markets is the opening of a brand new factory in Saudi Arabia by Wazeen, a subsidiary of Ornua that makes local cheese from Irish milk powder. The Irish Farmers Journal's agribusiness editor Eoin Lowry was there.
So I'm out here in the middle of the desert at the opening of the Ornua Wazeen cheese manufacturing processing facility, and I'm joined here with Mark Fenelon, who's the head of the food research project at Teagasc, and also Tim Guinea, principal research officer at Teagasc. So turning to you, Mark, maybe just tell us first, why are we out here and what has brought Teagasc out here in the first place?
We're out here, I suppose, as a result of a very innovative project which was developed by Tim, and basically it was a perfect example of fundamental research which has been taken, I suppose, from the Teagasc base all the way through right to a commercial product and process, which is what you're standing in here today.
What resources and what infrastructure was needed to get the project to this stage?
Well, obviously Tim, principal investigator, and also the infrastructure as regards to the pilot plant was supplied by Moorpack Technology Limited.
Which is industry supported.
It's an industry supported. And actually Moorpack Technology Limited was key because once Tim had developed the technology, was at the laboratory stage, and then Tim, in conjunction with Ornua, were able to go to Moorpack Technology Limited and then scale it up and test it in an environment where they had full flexibility, very highly trained operators, and a sophisticated suite of analytical technology around them.
So how long ago did this project start, Tim?
I suppose initially the concept arose about 10 years ago, where as a part of a research project we had a need to develop cheese from ingredients rather than from milk. So then we got a research project to validate the concept of making cheese from reassembled milks formulated, say, from proteins, specially designed, and other ingredients, and how the reassembled milk-based technology differed from conventional cheese technology is that we actually formulated the reassembled milks with precision control to the final composition of the cheese, and then subjected these reassembled milks to gelation, which resulted in cheese without any whey expression Normally whey accounts for about 90% of the milk in conventional cheese manufacturing. And I suppose, so it's a very new way in making cheese, in that we're not starting with milk, but we're reassembled milk.
So what goes into this, typically into this cheese?
Typically, the most important ingredient actually is milk protein powders with special functionality.
Okay.
That's the critical factor actually.
So it's not often that a lot of new technologies or research gets actually to this commercialisation stage. How has it been possible here?
In Moorpark we had the belief and the optimism in this particular technology because it was a new way in making cheese, completely new way. And combining that, say, with our smart ingredient program, we had absolutely fundamental confidence in that technology as a new technology that would take Irish ingredients and convert them into cheese anywhere.
And this is very unique technology, and I understand it's under patent.
It's actually under patent, and we have a license agreement for this particular suite of cheeses.
I'm here now with Kevin Lane, CEO of Ornua. So Kevin, tell me, why is this investment important for Ornua, and what does it mean for the Irish farmer?
Very proud day for us to be here representing the Irish dairy industry all the way across the world in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, where we feel there's an opportunity to go into a very large growing market on the cheese segment. And working with Teagasc in Moorpark, we've been able to develop a new range of technology that brings powders from Ireland, from a number of our processors, into a manufacturing facility here that has technology that will convert that into very high premium white cheeses for the local, initially Saudi Arabian market, and in time all across the Middle East. It's important to Irish farmers because it is creating a completely new added value route to market for the raw material that we produce back home.
And how important are these international markets like the Middle East, and particularly we saw Gulf Food in Dubai last week, and we're here now in Saudi. How important are these international markets into the future with the extra milk coming on board?
Our view is that they're absolutely critical. While we're optimistic that we'll continue to get growth from Germany, the United Kingdom and the USA, to mention our core markets, we genuinely feel that the growth rates in these markets, A, because we're starting from a zero base, so everything we get is new, and B, because consumption in these territories is growing in double digit, in many areas 5 to 6%, versus the home domestic markets, including the USA, growing at 1 to 2.
So we're standing outside this state-of-the-art facility, really. It's at the top notch of what technology is that we've seen in Ireland and any dairy facility around the world. I think it's close to 20 million euros investment here. Why is it so important to have a factory located in the market?
There are a few reasons, Owen, and it's something that we worked on 4 to 5 years ago when we were developing the strategy. On the first instance, we wanted to try to avoid all of the duties and restrictions and levies there are when you import into these countries. So obviously we can remove that if we're manufacturing locally. Number two, we got a very strong impression from a lot of consumers that we were talking to in these markets that they certainly wanted high quality, but there would be a stronger positive support for a company that was willing to set up manufacturing, become part of the local economy, create employment and make sure that we're doing it in the local market. As well as the financial benefits in doing that, it removes the logistical time delays, it removes the hassle that you have at the port and in other places in getting product approved and into the market, and it allows us for a more seamless supply chain where we can supply premium product as the consumer needs are growing and changing locally, adapted in our state-of-the-art facility here.
Well, Kevin, it certainly is a state-of-the-art facility, and I wish you all the best of luck in the future with it.
Thank you, Owen. Appreciate that.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
New export markets are a hot topic for the beef sector too. The chief executive of Dawn Meats, Niall Browne, was at the UCD Ag Debate last week, and my colleague Anthony Jordan spoke with him about progress in the US and China. But first, he asked him the question every farmer has for beef factories.
Are you getting many carcasses, heavy carcasses over 420 kg at the moment, and if so, what are you doing with them?
So there's a trend in our business that our customers don't want these heavy carcasses, that it's only a niche product. And so for the last 4 years we've published our specifications of what we want, and we want carcasses of less than 420 kilos. And so the trend in our business is that it's trending down all the time. because our suppliers know the specification that we want.
Perfect. Just in terms of the US market, what are the progresses in it, and is there any kind of hope of getting to China in the next year or two?
So in relation to the US, we're making steady progress. We're dealing with more and more customers, and we're building up relationships, and as the relationships build, the volume will build.
Mm-hmm. In terms of China?
In China, the full approval isn't there yet, so we're waiting on more visits from the Chinese authorities, which we hope will happen later this year, and we'd be hopeful that once full approvals are got, that the business will start in earnest.
Perfect. And how's things going in France? I know you took over, was it 49% share in Avivo last year?
The Olivier business is doing well, and we're working with the management team there, and we look forward to further progress this year.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
Trade with the US is fraught with a lot of hard questions. What will happen with the proposed TTIP trade agreement? And what about genetically modified food and hormone-fed beef? For an American view on these questions, the Irish Farmers Journal news correspondent O'Deill Evans met Ed Key, the Agricultural Secretary of the US state of Delaware.
What's farming like in Delaware? What's the main enterprise? What's the size of the farms there?
Yes, Delaware is in the eastern United States, about an hour from Washington, D.C. along the coast. It's a very small state. But our major, and 40% of our land is in farms, so we're still a pretty significant agricultural state. And our major crops are corn and soybeans that feed chickens. We have a tremendous poultry industry, and the processed or slaughtered and dressed poultry we sell up and down the East Coast. Delaware is within a 10-hour truck drive of 110 million consumers in the eastern United States. So we have that. We also have a strong fruit and vegetable industry, both fresh market crops and then crops that are sent to the freezer or to the canner for processing.
Mm-hmm. And in terms of our system here, as you've seen with Teagasc, our educational and every other aspect of Teagasc and all those things, is there anything that you've learned here that you think could work in the US?
Well, I really admire the education system, and I think the US has a great agricultural education system as well. But for example, we're here at Ballyhaise today, and I just learned about their level 5 and level 6 for young people that may not want a 4-year college degree. They get a terrific grounding in agriculture in a program like that. We're not so good at that. We tend to concentrate on the 4-year degree or none at all. So that was one very positive thing that we could take from Ireland and improve upon. The other thing I think, and it's not necessarily in my state or my region, but the U.S. maybe should look in certain areas more towards a grassland type agriculture in certain parts of our state, country. It may be economical.
Is it possible given the climate and soil type?
It is possible in certain states like Vermont, New York, are northern states where there's plenty of rainfall and the temperatures are cooler. It may work. Wisconsin may be another state where that could work.
I think quite a topical issue for us, and it probably in the US it's overshadowed by your presidential election, is the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership. What's your views on that?
That is TTIP.
Yeah.
And American agriculture generally supports TTIP because it opens up trade, and I know that's competitive, but and on the same hand, in the Pacific region, we have a TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership.
It was just recently.
So we see that as positive in breaking down the barriers to allow agricultural trade to go back and forth is good. The U.S., we sell 80% of our agricultural production domestically and 20% exported. And that ratio is probably reversed here in Ireland and from some of the countries that are represented with the Nuffield Group, like New Zealand and Australia and perhaps some others. So it's a different situation, but we also see trade as another pillar of a safety net for farmers. If the markets are expanded, the chances are the prices will be higher for the farmers.
And just on that, I mean, from the perspective here, on the TTIP, a lot of people are concerned about hormones used in beef production, GM produce. Well, what do you say to people with those concerns?
Well, on the GM, quite frankly, I believe in that science. I believe it's safe, and I believe that science is important to improve yields, but also quality attributes of certain crops for nutritional benefit and so forth. So I just think GM is something that's a great scientific tool, and we have to embrace it and understand it. I can understand the concern about hormone-fed beef. I think it has been safe, but even in the States we're seeing movement away from that, and also farmers adapting certain management practices that help the animals grow quickly but without hormones. So the hormones, I don't have a strong position on that. I see both sides, but I do see a trend that consumers are demanding hormone-free, so therefore farmers in the industry have to adapt to that to meet that consumer demand.
Yeah. So following on from that, I mean, Ireland recently got access to the US market for our beef, and obviously we're pushing it as grass-fed, hormone-free, so you see a market there?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, a big market for grass-fed, hormone-free beef. And I tell you, on the East Coast, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, there is a tremendous Irish-American population that is very proud of their Irish roots. Maybe a campaign can be developed in those cities that, hey, buy this Irish grass-fed beef, and I think that will resonate with people. It's a branding that can go back to certain attributes that are associated with the grass-fed beef.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
The current income crisis is not all about dairy. Pig farmers are suffering too, and not only in Ireland. O'Deal Evans met Dutch pig farmer Ruben van Boekel and asked him about the situation in his country.
In Holland we've now a pig crisis. It's the same like in whole Europe. I'm a son of a pig farmer. I work for 4 days as an editor and for 2.5 days as on the pig farm of my parents. And we have tough times because we have oversupplied market in Europe, between 110 and 115% self-sufficiency. The challenge for pig farmers is to have a low cost price, but beside of that, to added value, to create more value at your products. And that's quite difficult. It's easy to say, but quite difficult to make that possible. And my study object as a focus will be on added value, setting up your own chain as a pig farmer, looking for the right parties, cooperate with, and add value on your product so you can make the chain maybe some shorter. That's my focus.
Okay. Well, obviously Ireland is going through the same crisis as you guys,
yeah.
And we only have about 300 commercial pig producers, and obviously some of them are exiting the market. There's a huge issue there as well. So I suppose, how do the Netherlands compete with other European countries with the pig industry? What sets you apart from the rest of Europe?
In Holland we have 1.2 million sows and total 12 million pigs. We have an amount of 8% of the total European production, pork production. So we are not that big player like Germany or Spain. We are now, because our strength was always that we have a very low cost price. We can compete with the rest of the world. But the last 10 years we had a lot of welfare regulations, the animal welfare regulations, environment. So our cost price is rising up every year, and 7% is higher than, for example, Germany or Denmark. That's our problem. We can't compete anymore with Germany, Denmark or Spain because of all the regulations. That would be the biggest challenge for us, for Holland, for all the Dutch pig farmers, to make profit on pig production. With cost price we can't win anymore from the rest, so we have to focus more on product leadership. probably.
Okay. And I suppose in Ireland we work at a system where we try to make a margin per kg of pig meat produced. So that margin has to be over feed. So we say the feed cost per kilo, yeah, that's fine, but we need 50 cent per kilo more than our feed costs.
Yeah.
In order to make a margin.
Yeah.
But currently we're getting 36 cent over the feed costs. So how do you calculate margins?
We have a cost price which including everything, and then you have a cost price per delivered piglet. It's because we have specialized farmers, the sow farmers, and we have the slaughter, the fattening farmers, the sort of big farmers. So it's very, in Holland is very specialized. So we're working with two cost prices from the piglets delivered at 25 kilograms or 23 kilograms, it depends on your farm. And we're working with a cost price per dead weight kilogram of meat, pork meat. And that, if we have that type of number, we can compare with other farms. And I don't know the exact English word for it, but probably it's feed profit, the profit minus the feed cost.
Yes.
Yeah.
In Ireland, we're in the region of 26 pigs per sow.
Average for the whole country.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, it could be.
What's yours?
In Holland we have 28, 29.
Okay, so the genetics are better.
It's not only the genetics, we are all focusing on piglet production for many years. So it's not only genetics, it's feed, it's knowledge, it's climate, it is everything. And that to be a pig farm in Holland you need a lot of knowledge, otherwise you can't compete with the rest.
And what is happening at the moment? Are there pig farmers selling their sows? Are they staying in the business? What is happening?
It was in 2007, we had probably around 8,000 pig farms in Holland, and now we have between the 4,000 and 5,000. So we are in 7-8 years, that's almost halved.
But are they getting bigger at the same time?
Yeah, they're getting bigger, exactly, because the number of sows and the number of fattening pigs is quoted. So that's always be the same. It's not possible to expand. Otherwise you have to buy shares from another pig farm in Holland.
We don't have that. Okay.
Yeah. So and we have 3 different kind of regions. We have region 1, region 2 and region 3. If you are farming in region 1 you can buy shares from region 3 too. You have to buy always shares from region 1 if you are farming in region 1.
And who do you buy them from?
Other pig farmers. They are owned by pig farmers.
And is this a government initiative?
Yeah, it is. Okay. Because after we had a big disease in 1997, the government decided we have to limit pig amount in Holland. So they had some rules. The amount of pigs will be the same, but it's up in scaling. So pig farms who will survive are getting bigger.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
This week we're starting a series on locally led agri-environmental schemes. They provide funding for groups of farmers to organise and protect important natural habitats, and the Burn has pioneered the system. Odile Evans spoke with Sharon Parr, a scientist working on the project.
The thing was, we have REPs, EOS, now GLOS, but in many ways they're broad brush national schemes. They're not designed to solve the problems of particular areas. And you've got areas like the Burren, Wicklow Mountains, particularly these areas which have designated land SACs. There's a requirement there for a desire to manage the habitats and try and get them in good condition. But the fact is, the systems were being designed elsewhere. They weren't designed in the area. The thing is, they often know what the problems are. They also know what the solutions are. But it's the help to do that. And that's where these programmes can come in. There's a benefit both for the farmers and for the environment. The Burren Life project came to exist in many ways because when the SACs came in originally, there was a huge lashback. It was imposed on farmers. The issue was they could appeal, but they had to appeal on scientific grounds. Where they were going to get those scientific grounds to appeal from. Michael Davern looked at it and he thought there has to be an opportunity here. He also knew that the farmers knew what most of the problems were. The main driving thing in the Burren was it was starting to become winter-grazed, which is not good for the habitats because the winter grazing is the key to maintaining. So there used to be a big pressure, which is gone. In fact, one of the main problems that had to be solved was feeding silage doesn't fit with the conservation that's needed or protecting water quality, things like that. So how do you solve it? With choggers, a Burren Life ration was developed.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Margaret Hawkins wrote an article in this week's Irish Country Living after visiting the First World War battlefields in France and Belgium. Dermot Kern works as a guide on the historic site, and he told her how the fighting of 100 years ago still affects the work of farmers today.
First of all, your original farmsteads would have been destroyed. Your homes would have been destroyed. The roadways would have been destroyed. And then where we are at this very moment, we are near Ypres and the Messines Ridge. The actual drainage of the land would have been totally pulverised by the constant shelling and so on during World War I. Can you imagine that 1.5 billion shells were fired more or less along these 80 miles? Natural drainage features, streams and rivers would have been altered, would have been changed, and it would have been a massive sludge and war wreckage left behind. Yesterday we stopped outside the French small town of Guillemont, well associated with the Leinster Regiment and people like Emmett Dalton back in 1917. We stopped outside Guillemont, and as we went into the cemetery, I just took one person and we walked into a freshly ploughed field adjacent to us. And within seconds, we had found live ammunition. Within seconds, as you just simply raked the ploughed earth with your fingers, you were bringing up lumps of lead, shrapnel from these millions upon millions of shells which were fired and which exploded during the war. Of all the shells fired, about a quarter were what they called duds. And so you end up with shells with high explosive or with gas, and lethal gas in many cases, still in the soil, under the soil, or whatever. They figure in excess of 30 million of these are still in the fields between where we are in Ypres and then down to the Somme battlefield.
All I can think of is the people who are ploughing. It's a bit like Russian roulette.
It is a bit like Russian roulette. I gave an example there yesterday of watching a farmer plough here last November, and as he ploughed with a fine pace up the side of a hill, lo and behold, what happened then was you could see 5 or 6, we'd call them amateur archaeologists, out there with their metal detectors following in the wake of the farmer ploughing.
So instead of the seagulls, you had the men
Instead
with
of the
metal
seagulls,
detectors.
you had the men with the metal detectors. Where we are present now in Messines, you will find that along the sides of the road, it's a normal occurrence. It happened to me on my last visit here, that suddenly a military vehicle appears down the side of the road, and Belgian soldiers dismount from the military vehicle, head into the fields, and come back with a live shell which a farmer has reported. You're looking at, in this area of Ypres alone, something in the region of about 40 or 50 tons of live ammunition being collected by the military every single year. It's an astonishing experience. Farmers have been injured. Farmers are almost blasé, would you believe, indifferent. They'll see a shell turning up in the soil and they'll just simply carry it to the side of the road and put it by the lamppost. And the Belgians have what they call the milk lorry. And the milk lorry is this military vehicle which does a tour of the roads every day. It's out there every day and collects what's left out for it by the farmers. You see, a shell can land in a field during wartime, and it might go down about 10 feet or 8 feet or 6 feet. But what happens is that over periods of time and frost, that this is pushed up, and so in springtime these shells can sort of peep up and show their heads dangerously to whoever is in the fields.
Just to talk about the war in general, I've found it a very emotional and moving experience actually being here in areas where thousands and thousands of people were killed, up out of trenches, over the top, mowed down literally. But why do you think it's important to visit places like this?
My own personal feelings are political in a sense. I'm very much a Europhile. I believe in the European Union. And I'd like to think that the European Union has, since it was created in 1957, there have been no wars between people like the Germans and the French and the British and the Belgians and the Dutch, whereas in the previous 50 years In the previous 60 years, millions and millions of people died. In fact, when you go back in the previous 1,000 years, these countries were warring with each other inevitably every couple of dozen years or so. And where we are now in Messines, south of Ypres. When you look at the monuments and you realise that even people like Irish Prime Minister, and British Prime Ministers and British Queens and Irish presidents have stood hand in hand or side by side, you realise that maybe it was a bit late coming, but we eventually, in our own relationships with our nearest neighbour, have achieved or are achieving this European consensus, which the French and the Germans have done and achieved much better than us over the last 60 years and 70 years.
It's wonderful to be able to relegate the slaughter and the massacre to the past, and I know I am thankful for the peacemakers. Dermot from GTI Tours, who showed us around the battlefields of Europe, thank you very much for talking to me.
An absolute pleasure, thank you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast, brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.
Finally, the Rose of Tralee, Alicia Brennan, is on the cover of this week's Irish Country Living. She has a word of advice for anyone interested in taking part in the festival, in conversation with features editor Maria Moynihan.
I think the universal piece of advice that I would give to anybody thinking of applying for the Rose of Tralee, but also a universal piece of advice for everyone, would be just be yourself. That's all it is. I mean, there's no competition. You're just in competition with the person you were yesterday. To just go out there, to enter it looking at it from an experience point of view. If you're looking to make amazing new friends, to kind of step outside your comfort zone, do something a little different, I would say go for it. I mean, I was that girl watching it for years and years and thinking I'd always like to become a rose, and then last October I just said, I'll just throw caution to the wind and I'll just go for it. So all I did was fill out the application form, and look where it's taken me. I mean, a year later, look where I am. It's just been the most amazing experience of my life. So just come to an information evening and see what it's all about. Meet the girls. I mean, anybody that speaks to a rose who's been a rose, since 1959 will be able to feel the passion. I mean, we have such amazing memories. I have a group of 100 odd new friends between all the escorts and roses this year. It has just been the most incredible experience of my life, and you can't really tell someone how incredible it is. You just have to come down and feel it for yourself. This year is a really exciting year to get involved. There's huge changes with the Rose of Tralee. All 68 roses will be coming down to Tralee. We also have 3 nights on television, so the 2 traditional televised nights with Dahi O'Shea, and also a 1-hour kind of documentary behind the scenes look at what the girls get up to on tour. It really is such an exciting year to get involved. It's the year to do it. I mean, it's going to be bigger and better than anywhere. Tralee during festival time is just pure magic. It really is something special. It's been compared to Disneyland, and I wouldn't argue with that. One of the highlights for me for down in Tralee was the parade. It really is, and you just feel like a Disney princess. It's so spectacular. I mean, Denny Street is lined with 20-odd thousand people. It's really such an incredible experience. I mean, all it took for me was fill out an application form, and it's hand on heart the best decision of my life. It's taken you
to Calcutta, and you're going to Australia shortly, and also an interesting experience in Monaghan. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so we were up at a fundraiser for the Chernobyl charity, AD Roach's amazing charity, and we have an escort and a rose up in Monaghan who are travelling out actually in a couple of days. And one of the prizes for the auction was a bull calf. So myself and a couple of the escorts went in on a syndicate, and now we are the proud owners of a bull calf being minded by Fergal McNally on a farm in Monaghan. So I think its middle name is going to be called Rosie.
Okay, so you heard it here first. Alicia's going into the beef trade.
Going into the beef trade, yeah, you heard it here first.
Dr. Rose and beef farmer.
Beef farmer, that's it, yeah, along with 5 other escorts. So we had a great night up there, yeah, and we raised lots of money, which is really important.
That's an important thing. Thanks so much, Alicia.
Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie, on the Irish Farmers Journal app, and on iTunes every Thursday. Brought to you by Ornua, the home of Irish dairy.